An autonomous railway car. Today, I'm at the railway station of Kopidlnka, out in the town of Kopidlnka, somewhere to the northeast of Prague. And behind me over here is a rail car. Now, if you're from the Czech Republic, you are probably familiar with these rail cars, but if you come close to it, you'll notice there are some different things compared to your normal rail car. That's because this rail car is not your normal rail car. It's an autonomous rail car named EDITA.
Let's quickly talk about autonomous trains, because EDITA isn't actually the first one. Automatic train operation, or ATO, has been around for several decades. ATO refers to what degree a train can operate on its own without the need of a driver. This is not to be confused with automatic train protection, ATP, and automatic train control, ATC. The abbreviations can sound rather interchangeable, but all three function differently, or, to be more technical, they build on each other. Without getting into too much detail, ATP is a safety mechanism ensuring, for example, the driver is obeying the speed limit, otherwise the mechanism slows down or stops the train. ATC builds upon ATP, where a train can adjust itself with real-time changes. For example, a train running behind another train will inform the driver how fast they can operate depending on the distance in between both trains. While trains with ATP and ATC rely on a person to actually drive the train, ATO builds upon the two mechanisms by making the train run entirely without a driver, or at least that's somewhat the case. ATO has what's called grades of automation for different trains and their systems. The grades go from grade 0, which has no automation and a driver operates the train, to grade 4, where there is full automation and no driver. For example, the air train at JFK International Airport is a grade 4 system. In between 0 and 4, grade 1 to 3 requires a driver, but each level gives the driver a different amount of responsibilities. The higher the grade, the less the driver or operator needs to be involved. Grade 1 is more or less similar to grade 0, but with added train protection systems for railways, basically ATP. Grade 2, on the other hand, is a step up by giving the train the ability to drive. However, a train still requires a driver at the helm to dictate when the train can move, operating the doors of the vehicle, and take control if something is wrong. Grade 2 is particularly used on subways and metros around the world, like the 7 train in New York, the Victoria line in London, and many others. Grade 3 can be described as nearly full automation. The reason for this is because the train can drive on its own without any need of a person to sit at the controls. However, an operator is on board anyway, either with some normal operational role, like operating the doors, and/or used to drive the train in case the automation doesn't work, among other situations. A great example is the Docklands Light Railway. So where does EDITA fit in all of this, and what makes it such a unique entry into the ATO sphere? Well, I'd like to think that automating a train, that is, the train can drive itself, starts at grade 2 and goes up from there. If you noticed, all of the systems I've mentioned thus far are what we would call closed systems. Simply put, these systems have little to no interactions with the outside environment. Or, even more simple, nothing crosses the tracks. Without having to interact with anything on the tracks, there's relatively little tech that needs to be used to make a train run by itself. It's why metros and subways are the only ones which can easily be automated. A rail line, on the other hand, is far more complicated. Trains are exposed to a lot of conflicts and unexpected events. For the longest time, technology hadn't been evolved enough to let a train operate by itself in this hostile environment. Okay, hostile might be a bit too much, but you get my point. And that's where EDITA fits. AŽD Praha has built a train, or rather retrofit an old train, to operate on its own out in the open world. It wouldn't be right to say that this is the first autonomous train to operate on a rail line. Australia gets that title with their ore trains running in Pilbara, and then you have Hamburg with their S-Bahn trains running autonomously as well. Regardless, EDITA is another autonomous train which runs passenger service on a rail line. And, as far as I'm aware, the first autonomous rail car. So let's actually talk about EDITA already. EDITA stands for Experimentalny Dražní vozidlo Centrum pro Inovativní Technologie AŽD. And if you don't understand Czech, then it stands for Experimental Rail Vehicle for Innovative Technologies AŽD. The vehicle itself is a Class 811, a rail car which is a former Class 810. Class 810s and some of their various class rebuilds, like this Class 814 you see next to EDITA, are the backbones of regional lines in both Czechia and Slovakia. Czech's national railway carrier, České dráhy, gave the Class 810s a branding name, calling them Regiomaus. But as I mentioned, EDITA has been modernized as a Class 811, which means she has a lot of new gadgets and gizmos to allow her to operate almost independently. Her new toys allow her to operate autonomously at grades 2 and 3. As we have discussed, and according to AŽD, at grade 2, the train drives itself and just needs an onboard personnel at the driver's seat to confirm when to depart, operate the doors, and intervene the train when there is a problem. Grade 3 makes the train run almost entirely autonomously, where it only requires an operator on board to close the doors and let the train depart.
So in order to actually ride this, you can't sit in the motor car itself because they have all their monitoring equipment and all that, so there's no extra room for passengers. But instead, behind me, or behind the train I should say, is a trailer car, which is also typically used in some of these units. So usually for added capacity, but in this case, it's where the passengers ride. So let's go in there right now.
The train runs along a route called Kopidlnka, which connects Kopidlno with Dolní Bosov. AŽD Praha bought the rail line from the Czech national rail infrastructure Správa železnic with the intent of experimenting with autonomous trains. AŽD Praha runs trains on a weekend basis, granted with the Class 810s, but in April of 2025, the company began using EDITA for the public, running the train on the first weekend of every month and some given dates. There are several stops along the line, almost all being flag stops with the exception of the terminals and Dětinice. In total, it takes about 40 minutes for a one-way trip on the 24-kilometer journey. Before the train departed towards Dolní Bosov, the people from AŽD allowed passengers to come on board EDITA, giving us a glimpse of what equipment is used to make the train run autonomously. The AŽD folks explained the inner workings, although they were speaking in Czech, so I didn't understand a word. But at least they have information on their main website, as well as the Kopidlnka website, in English. I will list them in the description if you would like to learn more. After touring EDITA, I made my way to the trailer car, and the train set off towards Dolní Bosov. The trailer was a pleasant experience with some great amenities of its own. The seats were clearly refurbished to give riders a comfortable ride, there was a bathroom installed, and anyone who needed to bring a bike or stroller had room to put them on board the carriage. Also, AŽD generously provided free Wi-Fi on the train, so if for some reason someone was bored of this incredible experience, or wanted to send friends and family photos of said experience, they could do so without using data. There were also 2 display monitors at each end of the carriage, showcasing what EDITA's sensors were picking up, as well as showing our location on a map and other route information. But going back to the sensors for a second, the 2 main ones we see are a camera and LiDAR. A camera is pretty straightforward, but some may not be familiar with LiDAR. To put it simply, LiDAR shoots out lasers to determine how far objects are relative to the sensor. After about 40 minutes, the train finally arrived at Dolní Bosov, where all passengers alighted before EDITA went about changing sides with the trailer for her return trip to Kopidlno. The Kopidlnka service only operates 3 round trips on the weekends, which sort of translates to having a generous bit of dwell time at the terminals. So this gave me some opportunities to get some nice shots and grab some lunch at Dolní Bosov before heading back to Kopidlno. The ride back was just as pleasant, especially since I got the chance to sit at the rear of the carriage for some gorgeous views. Although, if there is one critique for the trip,
Something you have to understand about riding in a rail car, if the tracks aren't the best, you really feel every single bump, every single turn. There's a reason why it's better to have trucks or bogies on a train than just axles. I think I've proved my point.
regardless, this was a unique experience to get a ride from a rail vehicle that had to go through such a transformation in order to run autonomously. Although she isn't fully autonomous, or at least that's what legislation dictates. Remember, she is only able to operate at grades 2 and 3 of automation. She is yet to qualify as a grade 4 vehicle, and that is in main part to do with Czech regulations as of the release of this video. The Czech government only allows a metro-type system to operate without any personnel to supervise the vehicle directly. A railway vehicle, on the other hand, must have someone on board. AŽD is working to help set in place laws which would allow EDITA and any autonomous railway vehicle to run in the country without an operator on board. But do we need rail lines to have fully autonomous trains? Do we need to run trains without a driver or operator on board?
So with the ride over, let's head on back over to the studio. Let's give some final thoughts and remarks and, answer the question, are autonomous trains the future? Actually, I want to take it a step up than just doing it at my accommodation, because right now I'm at the Dietenica station, where presumably AŽD Praha does some of their work, and where I assume they storm EDITA. EDITA's not here right now, but they have their other motor cars, the class A10s. So why not here? So my thoughts on the train. The ride, it was great. A train ride is either good or bad. It was a good trip. The technology itself. So I support autonomous technology for trains, not for cars. Let me just get that clear. Autonomous cars, no bueno. Autonomous trains, on the other hand, good bueno. Even though that just means good, whatever.
But having driverless trains doesn't seem to merit much of a benefit. The big thing for me is whether a driverless train is all that safe. This may seem ironic, but having a driver on board feels much safer. I say ironic because trains have safety mechanisms to ensure the driver isn't endangering anyone.
Metro systems and whatnot, like closed systems, they can be fully automated without the need of a driver, but when we're talking about something out in the open, where you have multiple conflict zones, like especially railway crossings or railroad crossings, it's good to have as many eyes as possible, so that when there is something, you can, whatever it is, the computer or the person will stop the train. So it's not bad to have the redundancy. To the company's credit, one of their goals is to say that there isn't enough train drivers. That's one of the reasons why they wanted to test technology. They wanted to test this technology out, and that's fair.
If anything, I hope the outcome of this technology is a short-term solution for rail operators while they focus their efforts on hiring new drivers. At the end of the day, rail lines carry a lot of risk with them, as trains can carry large sums of people or freight, especially hazardous freight. The Kopidlnka line can be a good place to have an autonomous train run because 1, it's a short line, and 2, the train can only travel a maximum of 60 kilometers an hour. In essence, this poses less danger for the people on board and the general surroundings. That being said, having autonomous trains with the supervision of a driver can and has been beneficial, with trains running safer and more efficiently. And who knows, maybe I'm wrong and the future will have autonomous trains roaming about. It can possibly be more beneficial than our current ways of automating a train.
But yeah, overall, EDITA, loved it. It was a great train, a great ride, great experience, and I hope AŽD continues to strive in this technology. And on that note, next stop,